We're good to go.
Good morning, everybody. This is a meeting of the Downtown Facilities Special Committee. It's June 11th. It is 9:02, and we have 5 legislators here in the office out of 8, so we do have quorum, and we'll get the ball rolling here. Are there any changes to the agenda by anybody? Okay. Any comments from the public? Anybody want to speak? Okay. All right, so can I get someone to move the minutes of May 14th, 2024? Annie and Susan seconds. Do we need roll call or no? Okay, so all in favor? That's unanimous of the 5 here. Chair's report. First of all, I would like to let everybody know that we did receive a letter from the New York State Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation Department, and they've made some initial observations and do believe that, and I'll read it for exactly what it says in this letter. We know the office is located at 308 North Tioga Street, Ithaca Savings and Loan located at 300 North Tioga Street, Tompkins County Office Building at 128 Buffalo Street, and the DeWitt Park are all contributing resource to the DeWitt Park Historic District, which is listed in the State and National Register of Historic Places. So basically what they're saying is that these are contributing buildings to the Historic District, and it's something that we'll have to work through, this is their initial response back to us, and we'll talk about how we're going to manage that and how we're going to communicate with them. I think it'd be a good idea to invite them down, maybe take a tour of the buildings, and of course get input from our local DeWitt Park Historic District folks to get their thoughts on it as well. I think we're surprised that these 2 buildings, maybe 3 buildings, are all considered contributing, but we'll cross that bridge and make it over that hurdle. So I just wanted to. That letter has now been provided. So. The second part is a parking study, and by parking study I mean accessibility of what we're going to be doing here in this area, I want to open it up if the other legislatures feel that we should be doing a parking study and how that process should work, and want to know if anybody else has any comments on that before I comment. Mike?
I think if we don't do a parking study, we'll be criticized. We did a parking study when we built the Human Services Building, and that clearly stated we needed surface parking, which we have a couple of lots over there. In addition, it looked at the parking on the streets that was available, and there wasn't a garage located close, but there's a garage here, but we know that garage is probably overused. So I would be in favor of doing a parking study.
Veronica?
Yeah, I would be favor in doing a study about how people do and can get to the buildings. I'm not in favor of restricting it to parking, as we've talked about this before. So I guess I think it makes sense to do some kind of assessment of what I guess the transportation to and from the buildings, both for people working there and people visiting. So breaking it up into like where are people coming from and how long and what transportation modes, whether it's like parking or how are the bike routes, how is the public transportation, if any, assessing that would be good. I'd love to know, might be hard to get on like visitors to the building, but on employees to our current buildings, like how do people get here now, if that's possible? And why, like what constraints are there on that? What I'm saying is pretty broad, so I guess I'm curious. You just said parking study, but what do you mean?
I meant to encompass accessibility, and parking is just the simple way of calling it, so. Yeah, Katie?
I just wanted to answer Veronica to some extent. We do have in our current work program conducting a commuter survey of our employees, so that would help inform what you're asking for.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Veronica.
Can you just say more about that?
Well, actually, Terry's behind me, so maybe I'll ask Terry to step up. He is leading the effort on this, and I believe the questions have been drafted already.
Yeah, so I've done some commuter surveys with some other municipalities. I mean, a lot of the times we're using it as a preemptive step to get information for our greenhouse gas inventories for our government operations, and looking at how far people are commuting, how often they're commuting, what types of vehicles they're using. The most recent one I did with the town of Ithaca, we also added some additional questions that we're looking at, if you're using certain types of transportation, why aren't you using other types? What would encourage you to bike or walk more, or to use public transportation? Are you considering an electric vehicle? Those types of things. So I think it'll be a mixture of kind of the quantitative and qualitative data. And depending on what folks might want, we can definitely add questions to that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Anybody want to, Annie?
Yeah, I definitely think we need a parking study, and I like how the commuter study will give us a lot of that information. And I do like the questions about like what type of transportation, is it public transportation, vehicles, the bikes? Are you going to be asking like moped or motorcycle?
Yeah, I mean, the way I've done it in the past is we'll have, some pre-selected choices, and then we'll also have an open choice. So if someone has a unique way of commuting, they commute via unicycle or something like that, it gives them that option. But generally, we put in a vehicle, and then the next question might ask what type of vehicle. Are they coming with a pickup truck? Are they coming with a sedan? We try and get roughly how many miles per gallon. Again, a lot of the times these are geared more towards doing a greenhouse gas inventory and the data that we need from that, but we can certainly try and make it more qualitative as well.
Yeah, I like that because I know, like say, for some of those things like the bicycles, motorcycles, unicycles, those type of things, they take up less parking, and so if we kind of know and plan for that, you can have two spots for those, and then you would take, rather than a motorcycle, for instance, or a unicycle coming in and taking up a whole spot, you can have some smaller designated spots, and maybe part of our parking study for us, but like secure places for bicycles and things like that. I'm hoping we do something very secure, because especially for our employees, because if the bike's there all day, there's so much theft nowadays. So it would be great if we could have some indoor space.
I mean, to that point, Annie, nowadays with the survey technology being online, it makes it a lot easier to ask follow-up questions. So what we've seen in the past too is asking a question, would you consider riding a bicycle? What would make you more likely to ride a bicycle or a moped? Is it secure bike parking, as you're mentioning? Is it, having a place to change, a locker room, for instance, when you're coming to work and you're sweaty and you want to change clothes, and having a spot. And so we can do so and leave it open-ended as well. So if there's ideas that we haven't thought of, that people can contribute that too.
And would you consider more an electric vehicle if there was charging? That's Absolutely. The type of thing you could ask.
We can do that.
Yeah, I like, also including for our parking study then would, with access to the building, as, was already said, so how are people going to access it? Where are going to park? and I would imagine that's going to be working with the city too, to see if we can possibly have some 15-minute parking or something like that, so people can use the building easier. Maybe some handicap parking.
Yeah, I would just say the City of Ithaca conducted a pretty robust parking study looking at on-street spaces and the capacity of garages just a few years ago, I think. So I think that would be a baseline that we could start off with as well.
Yes, Lisa?
And also, to piggyback on that, was recently at a meeting where I'm understanding that the city, in partnership with the Downtown Ithaca Alliance, is considering refreshing their parking study, and was looking to see if the county might have an interest in partnering on that, or whether our interest is more solely looking at our employee commuting and parking for our buildings. So I would put that out there to see if there's an appetite for that.
Thank you. Yes, Veronica?
Susan's got her hand up first, I think.
Yes, I'm to your,
Right, she's the only one behind you.
You can't see me. I just wanted to ask, does what's currently being done, does it include questions about using TCAT or other bus systems as well?
Yeah, we will definitely include
Okay.
forms of public transportation. So we had plans to do this later this year. I mean, we can certainly talk a little bit about what the timing of that might look like.
And I would just add that after this conversation, I think we would look at the questions again and see if there are any things we could tease out around parking and how people feel about parking, where they're willing to walk to, and that type of thing.
Thank you.
Yes, Veronica?
I think to what you just said, Lisa, because I personally think that the county should participate in any kind of downtown parking study. I don't know exactly what this entails, just because we have a lot of facilities downtown and a lot of parking spaces. And I think I've said before, like, a parking space is not a surface parking space is not a very high level use of land. It's less bad when it can be used like a greater percentage of the time. So we have a lot of parking, like the lot on Sears and Tioga Street, that is just wide open empty, not during business hours, not necessarily fully empty. And so if there could be cross uses, not necessarily of that, but somehow that, like, there could be parking from different, if parking could be shared across in like the time dimension, that would be cool. But I see Mike has something.
Thank you. Yes, Mike?
Well, service parking is going to be here or it's going to be somewhere else. If you do park and ride, well, then you're taking and putting a surface parking lot in some other municipality and getting it out of the way of the City of Ithaca. Thinking of discussions I had with the two mayors ago about the issue, he would have been very happy if everybody lived downtown Ithaca and nobody had any cars and they just always just lived here. Surface parking is something that people want to have. They use it. It is less expensive overall than trying to maintain parking structures, which deteriorate very rapidly with the salt and everything else in them. Most people don't bicycle. Most people don't walk to work. In our county, I'm not going to ask for it, but I bet if we had a show of hands right now and ask how many people drove a vehicle, a car, or to get here, most of the people in this room probably would say they did. There's nothing wrong with the parking lot on Tioga Street. It will be more used once the Center of Government building is built, which takes away parking over there and adds the need for parking at the Tioga Street lot. Unless we're prepared to build a parking ramp, which the general public won't use, they'll just go somewhere else if they need same reason that we don't have DMV downtown in the center of town. We have it where there's parking. People want their cars. They want to drive with them. I realize the issues that everybody has, particularly in Ithaca, with the use of personal automobiles. But it's not going to go away. We're going to have it, whether, well, maybe they'll be electric. That would be a good thing. But I just think that the parking study ought to understand that human nature is human nature, and not everybody's going to bicycle to Wegmans to get their groceries every week.
Veronica, then Rich.
So we can debate this all day and get our feathers ruffled. I know mine are, but I think that's why it would be helpful to have data. And I'm not sure what exactly the next step is, because we've talked about like studying how people currently get to work. Sounds like maybe we're studying how people are going to get to work, how people are going to get to buildings who don't work here. And I'd love, I guess, for this committee to be able to see before a study is all said and done, like what is going to be studied, not even necessarily the nitty-gritty details, but like Terry, what you shared about the commuter study you're already doing, like that level, but for the whole rest of it. But I'm still not really sure what the scope is. But is that like next level of detail? Like, okay, we're going to ask these people about this thing, or we're going to ask these departments about these questions. Is that something that we could see at some point? And I could leave that question in the air.
Katie, do you want to respond?
Well, I would just say that, yes, if this committee wants to see the questions that are going out to the employees before they go out, that's fine. I'm very well aware that employees only have so much bandwidth for so many surveys, so we need to make it one that's tight, not too long, that people can get through in 5 minutes or less to get a good survey response. So, sure.
Okay. Do you want to follow up on that, Veronica?
Just to be clear, it sounded like, Randy, what you brought up for this like item on the agenda as parking study was something broader or different than this commuter survey. So I'm asking about that, and I'm speaking vaguely because I only have a vague understanding, though I appreciate that.
So I think, for a parking study, I think that the data that we would collect from the commute survey would be integral to that. I guess the parking study might be able to be accomplished by, whoever gets hired to help design the building as well, once they have an understanding of kind of what we're looking at. And so I think in terms of order of operations, we can certainly try and start working towards a commuter survey that would then provide that data to whoever gets brought on board to be able to do a more comprehensive parking survey.
Rich?
Yeah, I think the parking study would help us in our work, so I'd support it.
Greg?
I was just going to say I support some sort of transportation study for the center of government, and I also trust our planning staff to do the survey design as it relates to, surveying our staff on how they, choose to get to work and what decisions they would make if situations were different. So personally, I don't feel a need to have the committee review those questions. I'm confident the planners can do the planning work as it relates to some sort of transportation study.
Anybody else want to comment on? Veronica, shoot.
I'm sorry, I know I'm taking up a lot of time, but maybe I'm not making sense. Though I appreciate the offer to review the questions, I don't need to review the questions. Maybe Randy, I have a question for you. Can you elaborate on what kind of a study you are proposing?
Sure. And I put parking study because I knew it would get everybody fired up. So just the term. And I don't really look at it as a parking study. I look at it as an accessibility study. So, that's what the industry calls it, I think, is a parking study generally. But I look at it as multifaceted. For example, all of our front-facing departments, they have people coming to visit them. So that'd be one aspect of the parking study. How many spaces do we need just for people coming to do business with the county, but also how many people are biking, buses, how do people get here, right, that are trying to do business with us? And the other side of that is our employees. Where are they going to park and how are they getting here, which I think you're working on that facet. So I look at it as the whole process. The other part that Lisa brought up is the involvement with the city. Should we be cooperating with them on a study? We obviously have other buildings in the city that there's parking issues or needs or accessibility changes. So whether we do a study that is just for this area here and a separate analysis of something else, I don't know the answer to that, but maybe as we get proposals from people. So my question is for Lisa and for planning, do we know resources of people who could make proposals to us for this type of work?
Sure. I would just suggest that the design team that we hire would be able to sub out for that or have somebody on their staff that I think could handle that. I think looking at parking is something they do as part of a building design.
Mike?
I don't want to decide what questions are going to be asked, but I do hope that they're structured in such a way that they give responses for people who travel or commute both in the summer and in the winter. Because I would be surprised if many people who bicycle in the summer also bicycle in the winter.
Yes, Lisa?
Back to the city's overall parking study, the initial conversation was just conceptual in nature, and I just wanted to, this seemed like the committee to inform, and when I hear more about what they have in mind, I'll bring that information back to this committee.
Okay, well, what I've heard is it's unanimous that we need to do this analysis. What we call it can change, but I just wanted to bring it up and put that out of the way. So any other comments on parking accessibility? Okay. I did put on here under the parking study placement of front-facing departments because I wanted to make sure that was a focus for us. Are there anybody I want to put this to bed, anybody have any issues with any of the departments that have been proposed to be in this new center of government building? Seeing none, so we'll move on. So that's, Mike, go ahead.
As long as we can make sure that the front-facing ones are on the first floor, where that people can get to them easily, that they're accessible and not have to use elevators to get to the counter at the finance department or the county clerk's office or something like that. It ought to be easily accessible.
Thank you. Yes, Annie?
Yeah, I'm thinking that might be difficult. I don't know, because you'd want to have the whole finance department together, I would imagine. You'd want to have the whole clerk's office together and not have them, for staffing and a lot of other efficiencies. So, but I think looking at that, as we go along, seeing how we can do that. And I don't know if that would be part of some information we could gather. I don't know if it'd be a study, but how often do people come into the different departments? If we could have a sense of that, because then that would say, well, we have the most people come for the clerk's office for various things, and I don't know which department that is. Then for people who are older, if for instance, if the office for the aging's over there, then would you want to make that more accessible? So. But I think it's a conversation, to think about as we go along.
Yeah, Rich?
Yeah, I sure hope we can put this to bed. And I take the comments from Ann and Mike, but I don't think we need to address those. One thing I think county administration should think about is that we're one county. We are not a county of county departments. And the front-facing, public-facing elements don't have to sit in separate departments, that you could do cross-functionality and make this work on one floor. But that's a discussion, I think, for another day. I think we've hashed through this pretty well. Anyway, I'm fine moving forward, Randy.
Great, thank you. The last thought I have on this, has there been any discussion or analysis by departments as to how many people visit them per day? Is there any, or is that something the architects or engineers would be doing in a parking study?
I would imagine it would be something for the development team to consider. I don't know that we have measured frequency by day, certainly annually. So it's certainly, the wheels are turning here. It's certainly something to be considered.
Great, thank you. We'll move on. Now we'll have some fun. So the county legislature voted unanimously to move forward removal of the properties located at 300 and 308 North Tioga Street in the City of Ithaca a few months back. We, as I read earlier, got notification from the State Historic Preservation Office that they don't want to see that happen, or these two buildings anyways, without understanding, without them understanding more of what we're trying to accomplish, I guess. I don't think we can move forward with taking these buildings down at this time, but I'd like to hear people's thoughts on that. Mike?
Here we go again. Red Mill Road Bridge, Freeze Road Bridge, and now taking down these vacant buildings. Red Mill Road Bridge, SHPO's put such requirements and such impediments to the county being able to get the federal money for that we had to just give up on it, and we had to turn around and pay back money that we had already used for design because that was part of the project. We ended up building a bridge ourselves, which is functioning very well in the Malloryville area. Freeze Road Bridge. The state gave money for 2 bridges at the same time. The George Road Bridge was built expeditiously, and it has been functioning for at least 2 years, maybe 3 now. Freeze Road is closed because when it started at the town level, because the town got the money for it in the grant, it was still open, at least for reduced traffic. It isn't now. Trying to appease everybody. I heard at the last town board meeting that the bridge is structurally impossible to rescue. They're just going to have to rehabilitate the trusses for decoration. And they're going to build a regular bridge, and then they're going to put these trusses on for decoration, which is what was done years ago at the bridge in Forest Home. So here we go again. How many years has it been now? It's been at least 2 years. They still aren't ready to start construction of the Freeze Road Bridge. I think we ought to bite the bullet and say, let's take these buildings down on Tioga Street. If they don't want to give us grant money because of that, well, we may have to build it ourselves, just like we built Red Mill Road Bridge ourselves. We understood that if we can get grant money, if we do good things like the geothermic project for the area, and they don't want to give us money, well, I think we can make them look pretty bad because of that. But This legislature, at the F&I committee, Randy, you and Greg and Deb wanted to push this through as fast as possible. Went to the full legislature and got the approval of the full legislature for that. I don't think we should sit back on our haunches at this point because SHPO has sent us a letter. I think we just ought to move ahead with it.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Rich?
I'm not sure I'm ready to go as far as Mike Lane, but I share his sentiment. It's a month later. What's happened? Nothing. You know, and as I said a month ago, I'm very concerned that as we sit here on our hands delaying, we are going to raise the cost of this project just dramatically. And that's taxpayer money, and that's not responsible. I don't know quite how we put adequate pressure on SHPO, but you know, we need to push as hard as we can because our taxpayers demand that. And not to jump the discussion, but I read through the Key Bank building structural analysis pretty carefully, and there's nothing there. You know, if we're concerned about the look and feel of that building, the exterior, you got to take it all down. That the facade is not functional according to that survey, and you can't have that building look like it is. You could try to save some of the concrete on the inside, and in fact, early on in our discussions, I floated that, saying, wouldn't that be kind of neat to build around it? I lost that fight, as I sometimes do, and I'm ready to move on. But sitting on our hands is just so frustrating. And if this is the hill that SHPO and you know, I've seen my friends from Historic Ithaca here, you know, you want to fight on, it's like, why are we doing this? The county has made a decision about, do we want to maintain those two buildings? And, you know, the vote was, no, we don't. I mean, as I said, I was ambivalent on the Key Bank building. I lost. But reading this structural analysis, I think the rest of the legislature is right, whether they knew it or not. You know, you can't save that building in any kind of financially or in its current condition, you can't save that building without spending a tremendous amount of money and effectively rebuilding the whole thing. So you don't preserve the historic structure anyway. I'm very frustrated. Yeah, thanks.
Susan?
I was wondering if it was possible to share that structural analysis with SHPO, you know, because that is not some, I don't know if they saw that, but that was one question. The other thing is that within the SHPO letter, there were options for, I mean, it looks like they want you to jump through a lot of hoops, but it looks like there is an option to say, well, we can't really use this, so we're going to deconstruct it and, you know, use what we can and give to Historic Ithaca or whatever the elements that we can. But through that process, it is possible that it will just come to pass that it's just taken down. So the first question was, did they see this structural analysis?
It was part of the documentation we shared with them. I can't speak to how closely they read that. And I will say, I think, you know, reiterating what Lisa shared in her email, with our RFQ for a design team, you know, the SHPO is ready to talk with us when we are ready and have a design team in place that can, you know, evaluate the alternatives and then share back, you know, if there's structural or other issues that might make certain alternatives infeasible. So.
Because, I mean, it is possible through this, you know, the making us jump through so many hoops. What will come to pass is that they will come down. I mean, they will have to come down. Seems to me, so.
Annie, then Greg.
Yeah, so in their letter, you know, saying demolition, deconstruction of a historic resource is by definition adverse, which we understand, you know, that we always, you know, that it's been said to us, I don't know if I'm quoting exactly, you know, the most energy efficient, you know, or the most best use of a building is to keep it standing. And then they go on to, we recommend studying the feasibility of alternatives such as adaptive reuse plus new construction or partial demolition plus new construction to minimize harm to the historic resource. So to me, when I read this, I wasn't alarmed that I thought this could be part of the process as we're going forward, is that we're looking at, can we do that as we're looking at designing the new building? So that's just part of the process when we hire a firm to look to do that, and that we don't have to even do that separately as far as I'm thinking. I drive by every day at the old Joe's Restaurant, and we see, you know, what happened, what the city's trying to avoid is, you know, an empty lot. And that was there, when I was seeing that coming down, I mean, possibly there was somebody that went in there beforehand and took some things out, maybe not. But anyway, you know, it was leveled. So I think as leaving those buildings there for a little longer, as we're looking at the process, I'm okay with that. And they're asking us just to, you know, to me, this is, you know, a conversation that we're going to have with them. We look at these things and then see what, you know, we decide then.
Thank you, Greg.
Conversation.
Yeah, I hear all my colleagues, and I still advocate to move forward swiftly because I think some of this is a waste of time. I can just see the tours of the new county facility and saying, this was the one beam that was salvaged from the Key Bank building, and look at its significance and all its glory here in the center of government. It's never going to happen. Like, it's going to be so cost prohibitive. This is such a waste of time and resource. How many staff are sitting in this room and on this screen right now? I mean, talk about inefficiency of government at its finest, boom, right here. I mean, this takes the cake for me. I don't think our community, I don't think a majority of our community recognizes these buildings as any sort of significance to, there may be a small group of people, but I don't think that the broad community, and I think that's who we need to represent in these conversations. Personally, I would like to see us kill the power, kill the water, kill all utilities, and shut the buildings down and stop maintaining them in any sort of way, because they serve no purpose, and we are literally just throwing good money after bad in this process. And that, to me, is the biggest waste right now, because we have no intent of salvaging these in any sort of meaningful way. I would bet a lot that a majority of our colleagues, at least 8 of them, would move forward with taking these things down. So I don't really know what we're doing. I mean, I think we have evaluated the alternatives. Like, why do we have to waste hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultants to go back to the state and say this is what ultimately we've decided after evaluating the issues? Again, so I think if we can't move past this, we've got to move on from this. And to me, move on from this means abandon this dream of a downtown campus, which is beyond costly and incredibly difficult to try to navigate. And we should just move on to something that's easier, more efficient, more effective, and more accessible. And so if we can't quickly resolve this and stop wasting money on this process, then we need to, at some point, pull the plug and abandon the dream and build another one.
The report also included the building that currently houses the Board of Elections. So that's the one that blows me away. Is I think they should have to take a tour of what the staff have to work in. I can't believe it. The IT, the technology, and Board of Elections. I mean, that whole building is. That one is the worst one. I mean, I can see elements of the Key Bank why people would like that mid-century brutalist style. But the annex is awful for employees. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying, Greg.
Veronica?
Regarding the letter, I assume you haven't no one's gotten back to SHPO given the timing. And wouldn't it make sense for, maybe one of you, I'm looking at our staff here, I guess Megan, because it was addressed to you, to just call the person back and get them on the phone and say like, hey, thanks for this. Because the letter, it's not clear from the letter whether they have read anything beyond names of buildings and intent to get rid of them, but not like the facility evaluation. So, but they said for any other questions, feel free to call or email. I think a human-to-human conversation might be, as my colleague says, is important, much more efficient than this.
Lisa?
I just wanted to speak to the overall process in that the RFQ for design consultant and development team is now posted. And in that, we are looking for firms or individuals with expertise in historic preservation projects, and the back and forth communication and negotiation process with SHPO will certainly be part of when we're interviewing design consultants. That's going to be high on the list, but we wouldn't be looking for additional consultant work outside of that to do this back and forth negotiation with SHPO. It's kind of built into the timeline and the process that we're already on. And I would suggest that we can acknowledge to SHPO that we've received this letter, but when we have someone on board with that level of expertise, we can move forward with that and still be on the same timeline. And at that point, if it becomes clear that it's not feasible for us to operate within those recommendations, we can make that decision then. And I think it would be more clear in that design development timeline and process what might be at risk. I understand that, and I'm with you in terms of the concern and the taxpayer dollars. If we forego the opportunity for federal and state grants, that's another piece to this puzzle. So I think if we stick to the timeline we're on, we may not be further behind in terms of taking the buildings down and going through with the development plans.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Annie, then Rich.
Yeah, so I like the way that you put that, Lisa, and and giving us more detail on that. If we're looking at right now, it's not going to slow us down. We can stay on the timeline. I don't see any reason to expedite taking these buildings down, and I think we owe it as a fiduciary responsibility to the residents of the county that rather than foregoing any tax credits or any grants, any financial assistance that we could get to build these buildings or do the geothermal district, I think just waiting a little while, we can make the decision then too, when we have more information. So would just say steady as we go, so to speak.
Rich, then Mike.
Yeah, I hear what you say, Lisa. My concern is that we as a county have advocated for deconstruction as a reasonable alternative. The longer we wait, we compress the time that deconstruction can happen. We can't do it well. Certainly we can't do it in a thoughtful way. And for many projects, it takes so long to get the approval, you just have to tear it down. And I don't think SHPO is recognizing that, or at least they're not agreeing that deconstruction is an important element of construction projects. And I think we need to have some really zealous advocacy here. I'm wondering if the committee wants to reach out to our assemblywoman and our senator and perhaps to the governor to say this is not the way New York State should behave, that they need to help us. We're not some developer that is trying to do the corner of Meadow Street in Buffalo, where we tear down a building and then we don't have financing. We're going to build. You know, we're the county. We can't hide from this. We need the office space. We're going to do it. And New York State should recognize that, and they should help us. Last month I used the word trust, but on some element, they should trust us. We will build this building. Let us do it, but let us do it responsibly, and they're not. I'd sure favor getting our state representatives to try to work for us. Thanks.
Katie, do you want to respond to that? Or?
Well, I just wanted to say, and Megan or Susan or Christine can correct me, but I'm pretty sure SHPO has a very regimented process that they follow. This is step one in the process, where we just ask them to determine if they are contributing structures. I don't think they have any expectation they're going to read any structural analysis or anything like that at this point. It's seen as step one in the process, and after that, kind of what Annie was talking about is the process plays out. And then what Lisa was saying is when we hit the point where we have our design team that's meeting with the SHPO people, we'll have a much better sense of how reasonable they may or may not be in this process as different design options are presented.
Hey, Randy, could I respond to that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem, is their process was built long before deconstruction was an option or really considered as an important element. And they're just carrying on. We need to change that if we can. We need our assembly people and our senator and our governor to say that's not the way we want New York State to do this. And just saying, well, this is the way they do it, and they've always done it that way, that's an answer. It's not the right answer, and we shouldn't accept it, my view.
I wasn't saying you shouldn't accept it. I was just explaining what the process and expectations are.
But following that logic, it will be a year. We'll sit here. We'll have meeting after meeting, and nothing will happen while they think very slowly.
Megan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because this is really considered an initial consultation, because we did not come to the table with a design team, and all of those things where they saw us ready to initiate the formal review under New York State law. And they are regimented under New York State law, as are all the state agencies, if we were going to seek any kind of funding or permits from anyone. So that's why this letter, there are comments from staff so that we're aware of, what they've turned up, looking through what we have so far. When we have our design team in place and when we've had a chance to look at the alternatives they're asking us to look at that point, we can have the formal process under New York State law. Their review time is capped at 30 days. And, in this case, their 30-day window was going to be a little after this meeting, and they, tried to speed things up, recognizing you all would want this information before your meeting. So I will say, in terms of the agencies, whether they're state or federal agencies, there's a state law, there's a national historic preservation law as well, that those agencies, they don't have a choice. They're abiding by the law that they're, obligated to follow, in that process. We just haven't actually triggered that yet because we don't have that design team and we don't have our kind of design information to evaluate the alternatives.
Mike, then Greg.
One, I want to ask a question. Do we know who is advocating with SHPOs that these are contributing buildings, when all we've heard all before this is they were not contributing to the historic district? So that's just a question. The other thing, to Greg's point, we don't have to build this building. This has been a pipe dream for a long time. We did a full study of it when Joe Mariano was administrator and found that it was not financially feasible and we didn't need it that bad. We would like to build it, because it's been on the plate for 20 years, no question about it. It would be a nice thing to have. But let's be realistic. There is first-class office space within a stone throw of our campus that could be leased. And we don't have to build a $40 million building. Over the long haul, I think it would be a good thing to have, but it's not necessary that we do it. And if the City of Ithaca doesn't want us to do that, or if they'd like us to do what Greg has talked about over the years, whether we should move buildings out of here and take over at the mall or in a cornfield somewhere, you know, one of the things the city wanted when we built the Human Services building downtown, they wanted those employees downtown. We have a couple hundred people that work at our campus here in downtown Ithaca. I think they should stay here, but you know, if there are too many impediments, well, we have to start looking elsewhere.
Megan?
I can respond to the first part, and some of this is my interpretation, reading between the lines. And you know, Susan and Christine, please chime in if you see something else happening here. But I think part of the confusion is we have a local historic district and we have a national historic district. The local historic district does have a period of significance. I believe that ends at 1930, and so in terms of the local district, these aren't considering contributing to that original district's period of significance. However, we're also in a National Register historic district, and the way the state's explaining it in their letter, and that's part of this initial consultation to find out what we might not know, this was one of the very early historic district nominations on the National Register, and at that time there wasn't a period of significance, kind of stated for the national part, not for the local part. So the state's interpretation is if there is no period of significance set, and there hasn't been a modification in subsequent years to set dates of that significance, that they're considering, any buildings that existed at the time of the nomination, essentially to be contributing, and looking back at their records on these buildings, they don't see a reason for them not to be contributing to the national district. And so that's where I don't think, even the city necessarily would have, a clue that that interpretation might have come until we actually asked the question of the SHPO.
I have a question. So on the national designation, does the state historic preservation, are they the one that oversees the national? Or is there a separate organization that, so it's the state, so it's okay, so that's my question. Veronica?
We have an hour left in this meeting. Would it be crazy for someone well-informed to call the person who sent this letter and see if we look out and get them on the phone and see if we get any of our process questions answered? Let me rephrase that. Is that feasible to do?
I think it's premature.
Yeah, that would be my answer, is that I guess if it's not clear, staff is highly advocating waiting 2 months till we get a design team on board to be able to speak intelligently and comprehensively looking at the design with SHPO, because I would hate to have us burn bridges in the interim, because it's really not that far away that we're going to have people who can look at adaptive reuse and see whether it's financially feasible to do that or not.
Go ahead.
And I'll just add, in terms of, changing sites and things, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, but I don't believe the SHPO would want to, see us pick up and move to a greenfield location. I mean, a lot of what our project involves align with state goals in terms of, whether it's energy, access for the public to government services, keeping downtowns, vital. And so I think that's where they're used to, the formal review coming when we have that design team in place. And so they've had a chance to look at, are there reasons we can't do some of the alternatives that they've asked us to look at? And if so, having that conversation, because I don't think their intention is to stop the project. happening in this location. It's just to make sure we've done our due diligence for the options that are available to build a center of government. And that's why they're offering even to come in person, at that point when we've got architects that can explain if there are code issues, structural issues, other things, that at that point we have a strong team that can speak with credibility to their staff about why something is or isn't feasible.
Greg, then Susan.
Yeah, I just want to go on the record, Mike, I would never propose taking quality farmland away. So a cornfield would not be my recommendation. But
That was an expression.
No, I know. But our farmland protection is important. Aurel, are you a civil or structural engineer?
Civil with structural background.
Okay, so it's amazing that we had, sorry, Aurel Lamaro, what's your exact title, Aurel? Come on.
Come on up.
But I mean, you have to echo his answer because he doesn't have a
Director of
mic.
Facilities, I asked the question if he was a civil or structural engineer, and you said a civil with structural background.
Yes.
Okay. It's amazing we have professionals on site as part of our team already that we employ on a regular basis and have done a great job for over 20 some odd years for the county?
30.
Over 30 years, yeah. So this idea of having to bring in design professionals to weigh in is still what gives me a little bit of the rub when we have an expert and we already have a consultant that says the buildings are pretty hard to repurpose. I would not be in support of spending really much money at all in the process with our design professionals to explore options, because anytime we say explore, that's time. Time is money, and we can think it may not be additional, but it will guaranteed be put back into the project somewhere. Aurel, is that a fair assumption? I mean, they're not going to do this out of the goodness of their heart, right?
No, but it's in the RFQ that we are seeking, services in the scope to explore, adaptive reuse, some, deconstruction or additions and such. So they're well aware of that requirement for this project because of its location.
So we don't have to go back to SHPO with like 5 options or 3 options. We can say it's our professional opinion based on the fact that we're architects and engineers and we have evaluated all of these things, that these buildings have no purpose in the new center of government, and here is our plan. Is that an acceptable answer based on their process?
Or is it premature?
Well, hold on. Because they said come to us when you have your design professional. If our design professionals weigh in and say there's no point or no hope for these buildings to be reused in this project, but they can be deconstructed, is that a fair answer for SHPO?
I would say that it is premature in that we don't have even a conceptual drawing of the facility or anything.
Once we do.
Well, but I would assume that our design team is helping to get those early conceptual, drawings so that we understand, more than the general envelope that we've used like for seeker and things.
Sure.
But to answer your question, I think yes. That is a possibility that might come out of this study. And also just to reiterate what many of you have said already, when we were doing the RFQ, we already had guidance to include looking at adaptive reuse and whether there are aspects of the buildings that could be salvaged or incorporated, or we've had that conversation multiple times. So in my mind, this was already part of the process that we were going to follow with the consultant when they were on board, kind of as one of the components of designing the building.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't think that we should spend a tremendous amount of time and energy weighing multiple options, because every time that the architect reputs their digital pencil to the screen, it's going to cost more, right? There's going to be more things, or there's going to be opportunity in the future that we can't re-engineer something that may be important to this. So, and then I'd also like to know, could you share with us the SHPO process? And is it outlined somewhere, or do you need a law degree to decipher what their process is?
And this might be a place where Susan and Christine might have more experience with the New York State aspect. I'm a little bit more familiar with the Section 106 federal review. But, if we're kicking off a formal process, like if I had had design drawings and everything to upload, we could have kicked off, that more formal review. And that includes, them determining who is the public, because there's a public piece of this consultation. And that public for us could very well involve, local preservation organizations like Historic Ithaca, the Downtown Ithaca Alliance, the City of Ithaca, and the general public in different ways, which honestly, when we kick off that process, they can also be advocates for the project and why they want to see what we're trying to do happen where it's going to happen. And so, we actually need what we're trying to, more detail of what we're trying to accomplish. So if we had some of those conceptual plans and such, and then they would have, now we've jump-started that process, and again, they have, a 30-day, kind of like with our 239 reviews at the county level, they also have time limits on their reviews, so it's not a forever thing. And so they'd be looking at the archaeology, the structures in the vicinity, all of that. We have the benefit now, and this is why they encouraged us after our initial conversation with them to do this initial conversation, because that's jump-started, so they don't have to go back and redo this research again. So now they know, what resources they might be concerned about. So really, I think that's going to jump us, when we go into formal consultation, what are we proposing specifically? They know the resources there and their concerns with them, and then to have that conversation with us, how do we avoid or mitigate the adverse impacts to the historic resources that have been identified? And that's where, if our team has investigated the alternatives, maybe found some are options, some are not, then you're going kind of into a negotiation, essentially, to find the compromise that, that meets, all of these goals. And then with that, coming up with a formal agreement. So what are we going to do in terms of, avoiding and or mitigating those impacts, and then, go forward from there. So that's not to say, sometimes my personal experience was more with transportation projects. So a lot of times you're looking at, say, 3 alternatives, and sometimes you're lucky and there's an alternative that's totally viable that avoids the impact to the resource. Sometimes there's not, and there's a real, there's a public purpose to having an adverse impact. So you're making it the least bad possible in those instances and coming to agreement with, the preservation entity, whether it's at the state or the federal level.
Sure. No, I appreciate that explanation. I guess my one last question, because that was really helpful. And it's frustrating. It's a frustrating process. Like all things are frustrating at times, but I think we can work it out. My question, I think, would be more to Arel, especially with the budgetary constraints that we're putting on departments and asking them to make reductions and things. It seems fiscally irresponsible in this time to continue to pay to maintain these buildings when the county has expressed already that we have no purpose of really reusing them. What would it take if we cut them off from, power and other things like that in the process, or just stop the service, or, stop running the air handlers, et cetera, drain the pipes, those kind of things?
We can do that. We did that with the Baker Dental Building. We are conditioning at a minimum level the key bank because we're storing things there for now. We are a month into the cold storage building on Bostrick Road, so that'll be done probably in about 2 more months. And so we could move things that are stored at Key Bank out of there. We're not doing anything at the professional building. It's not mothballed, but we are at much lower level, heating and cooling, and so we're not freezing things. But we can obviously do that, and this committee legislature can direct us if you'd like us to do that.
Thank you.
Susan, then Veronica.
I'm going to echo a lot of what Greg said, but it sounds to me as though we're frustrated, we want to move forward, but there's a process and we need to just be patient and let the RFQ process, and just go through the process. Okay, thank you.
Veronica, do you have a question?
I was going to move that we accept staff suggestion and do what Susan said, and table SHPO discussion to our August meeting. Table further SHPO discussion to our August meeting.
August or July?
You said 2 months, so I meant August.
Well, it depends how quickly
Yeah.
we can get through the interview and consultant selection process. But I would say after that has happened is when it would be a ripe time for discussion.
Okay, then table till after that has happened. I don't know if that's a real motion one can make.
We can add it to the agenda at that time. Anybody else want to talk about this frustrating topic?
Well, wait a minute, she put a motion on.
Oh, is it a motion? Okay.
She wanted
We
to
don't know for
postpone.
sure yet if that's going to be the timeline, right? I mean,
Well, I understand that the proposals are due in early July 8th maybe?
9th, July 9th.
Yep, so then conducting interviews, I would say maybe late August, we could have a consultant selected, depending on how quickly we can move.
September meeting then.
why don't you guys come up? You're welcome to join us. Come right up and sit down.
If I may.
You're part of the family.
I just want to point out that actually.
You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Christine O'Malley, Historic Ithaca. I think that there are some things that have already taken place that put you in a better position with SHPO than you realize. Megan mentioned mitigation and the Section 106 process. So often when the State Historic Preservation Office or the National Register is looking for mitigation, it's in the form of documentation. And so I think it was mentioned either to the committee or to staff members that one of the historians from the National Park Service Historic American Building Survey lives locally and has already almost completed 2 document reports on 300 and 308. So that includes photographs, a complete building history, and a sort of summary of significance. And that is just going to be done and available and given to the county and will go on record in the Library of Congress. That's considered mitigation. So when your design team comes along, actually, they will have that documentation available to them. So the architects and designers don't need to spend consultant hours doing that historic research because they will have these 2 documents available to them to use. So that actually puts you a couple paces ahead in the process. So, you know, I understand the anxiety about timing and wanting to get going. I totally get that. But there are a few things that have already taken place that are going to help move things along. And you can always have informal discussions with SHPO before, you know, the 2-month period. So you can always have an informal discussion and ask a question. So they're always available to call. So I just wanted to point that out. So.
Thank you very much. Yes, Katie?
I actually have a question for you, Christine. Is the local professional interested in doing Building C as well? For
I will see him at a conference tomorrow and will ask. It's up to the chief of HABs to determine his time. And she approved these 2 projects because she saw them as these are 2 local mid-century buildings that are disappearing from the landscape and should be documented. But I can ask about Building C, which has a different level. So, yeah,
Thank you.
Okay, that was a good discussion. I think we have to remember that we approached SHPO, and we started this process because we knew it was going to be challenging and that it was going to take some time. So I think we're actually a little ahead of the curve as far as timing. So we didn't like the response we got, but as people mentioned, it was basically the response that they had to give, right? So I still would love to see us start knocking buildings down or deconstructing, I'm sorry, that. And questions for Ralph. So the area around the professional building has guardrails and those kinds of things. Can that all be removed to make it more accessible and easier parking? I mean, there's a guardrail between, the whole area could be cleaned up, I guess is my point.
The guardrail between like Building C And those properties, yes. I know there's a slight difference in elevation, but we can modify that so you can access it from our parking lot to get into theirs. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
But would you have less parking?
Yes, you would, because cars do park along that.
Right.
On the Key Bank side, they park along that
And this
guardrail.
side, yeah,
Yeah, on the south side.
both sides.
Yeah.
So
There are,
we
I think,
lose parking.
three spots that would be lost and none gained.
Right.
Okay. And just looking at the overall area and all the graffiti and all that kind of stuff just doesn't look great.
Right.
My other question is, to Christine's point, she talked about this document coming out about the buildings. In the timing of all this, is there a process where we can ask your opinion on it and get something in writing from Historic Ithaca to say that we want to take this building down, for example. We want to take the professional building down, we want to clean it up, we want to close it up, we're going to shut all the electric off and power off anyways. Is there a process that can be quicker, or does it have to be a part of the whole process? I guess. So I don't know if we can piecemeal this, or if we have to just look at this as an entirety and we can't do anything until we get approval for all of it. So
We've been working with Arel's department.
please give your name. Yeah.
Oh, Susan Holland, I'm the executive director at Historic Ithaca. We have been working with Arel's department, with Alan, and keeping each other informed about when we can go in and start doing the soft salvage inside. We'll have to talk about the grates on the outside, and that's going to be a little bit of a project. We actually do have a buyer for two of the grates, so people are approaching us about the salvage itself. So we're just waiting. Actually, our person who's in charge of that is away on vacation right now, but we're going to start working on that. And it also, I know that the buildings have to be mitigated for toxins, correct? Right. So we have to wait till that's done first, abatements for asbestos and lead. So once they do that and tell us it's ready to go, we're ready. So, yeah, except our truck's in the shop, but it'll be back soon.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Arel, is there any reason we don't do that cleaning up first?
No, I indicated either the previous or 2 meetings ago that we can do that prior to the RFQ or bringing the consultants. It's good information that they would need to have. Some of the consultants have an environmental group, but that means that we would have to wait probably 3 months to start. We can start within a couple of weeks to do the initial investigation for hazardous materials. We know there's asbestos. We've observed it in both buildings, and obviously lead, maybe some PCBs. So that'd be a process that we can start if the committee is okay in giving me that direction. We have funding to allow us to do that.
Obviously, we do want to have the things deconstructed and reuse as much of the material as we can from those buildings. But to Greg's point, is there any reason for that professional building we can't just shut it down and shut all the utilities off? And so would that cause any deterioration for any of the products that we want to have reused?
I mean, when you do mothball it, it does accelerate deterioration of the building. I'm not sure where Historic Ithaca is in salvaging anything that's there. As I said, Alan's been more involved, so I'm not sure if there's a lot of the interior components and such that are of interest. But we can find that out, and we can do that. We did that with the Baker Dental building. It deteriorates much faster during the wintertime. So we've got several months where we can work with them and remove things from there. But Susan is right that we would first have to do the asbestos survey, because if there are things that are attached or mounted to the structure, that we would need to know if it's hot or not before they're removed.
Greg?
Can we move in this committee to move on to the legislature or whatever the process would be to start the asbestos survey and toxin abatement process? Because that just has to be done, and that at least will be a nice consolation prize for progress.
It doesn't need legislature approval. I can move forward and do that.
Great.
It's the survey is not costly. The abatement obviously
Costly,
is, but the survey can be done. I just need you to tell me. Go ahead.
Well, one way or the other, we're going to have to abate it.
Right, regardless
of whether. So that SHPO is coming.
Correct.
Okay.
Regardless of whether we deconstruct, adaptive reuse, incorporate into the building, we would have to do that.
Okay.
It's a requirement.
So that SHPO can sail.
Yeah.
Right.
You got a better laugh than I did, Ann, but thanks.
Rich?
As Greg suggested, I'd move that we give Arel that direction.
Second.
Everybody in agreement on that? Yep, I think we're all in agreement on that. So thank you for doing that. Would you be the key bank and that building? Or
Yes.
Just, okay, great. One step forward. Small step it is. That's enough for this discussion, I think. Anybody, Historic Ithaca, would you like to add anything at all? Or? Okay. All right, let's move on. Arel, update from facilities, if you have any.
The RFQ was posted, as Lisa indicated last week. A lot of reviews, internal and finance, but we got it done and it's out. Since it was posted Friday at around lunchtime, we currently, as of probably an hour ago, I checked, 26 architectural engineering firms have downloaded the RFQ packet, and ranging from New York City, Rochester, Albany, Buffalo, Syracuse, Binghamton, and Ithaca. Several firms are showing interest. That doesn't mean that they're all going to respond, but I think that's good as far as interest. I indicated a couple of meetings ago that I would monitor that and report back to the committee, and I was hoping at least for 4. We've got 26. So, and those are, some are full service architecture engineering, some are just architects, and others are just engineering firms. So it's good. It's looking good.
That's great. Anything else from facilities? Or?
We hired a project manager. It's been almost 4 weeks now. So it's working well. He's read through the RFQ, is involved in overseeing some of our capital projects, public safety building, the cold storage, and hopefully soon the Center of Government project. So now that's working well. And you met him I think you met him at the last meeting. I brought him. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, Lisa?
Just in terms of expediency, and I know that we're all on the same page of trying to move ahead as quickly as possible. Once the responses are received from the RFQ, we'll want the team that's going to be reviewing them to assemble. We could even start to schedule that meeting now. And we'd be looking for a group of staff as well as members of this committee to participate in that team. And again, my recommendation would be probably 2 or 3 so that it's not a quorum and we can meet in between meetings and bring the information back to the committee for further decision making.
Okay, we'll get back to you on those people. I know that, well, Susan and I want to be on that list, and we'd like to add one more person to that list. Mike?
Yeah, we talked last time about not limiting it to 3 people. We wanted to be able to have more people on there who wanted to be on it. And so I disagree with that recommendation that there only be 3 legislators.
Greg?
Quorum, and Brittany, correct me if I'm wrong, quorum of this committee is 5? So you could have 4 without a quorum issue. And I think, Mike, your suggestion last time, which I thought was a good one, if there's 4 legislators or something part of that group, and then if other people wanted to join, they could join as sort of observers in the process. Is that what you suggested last time as a compromise, maybe?
I just think that this is an important enough project that we shouldn't exclude other people who want to be part of the review team. And I don't have a problem if we need to post this meeting and let the media come and look at it. That's not bothersome to me. I don't think they'll come anyway, but I just don't think we should for expediency, I don't think we should limit the number.
Greg, just to touch on that, though, we would have to make sure that whoever is on the review team doesn't make a quorum of other committees. Yep.
That's where the 3 came in.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll have to walk through that one, because I think there probably is enough people here that would make it a quorum on some other committee.
But you're not, excuse me, but you're not dealing with that committee's work.
Yeah, you could be right. I don't know what the Roberts Rules of Order are on that one, so maybe we should research that. But Susan and I talked to we think 4 people from this group would be part of the review committee. Susan and I, and if there's 2 other people from this committee, please submit your request.
So this
Already did that last meeting.
So I know Mike did, Annie did too. So is that?
And this is just to look at the application.
Yep.
This part.
But someone just suggested that people be just allowed to attend.
Right.
Is that possible, or does that mess up the whole quorum thing? Oh, it does, right? Okay.
Rich?
All the committee can look at the applications, right? They're going to be available, so, okay. Yeah.
The thought was, well, if we have 20, we don't know how many we're going to get yet. We have 6 people have downloaded it. You may only get 5, right?
Correct. We wouldn't interview, we wouldn't interview 26. Probably 4. We'll narrow it down to 4.
So the purpose of this group would be to narrow down the
applications that we receive, or responses to those that we want to bring in for an interview, 1-hour interview.
Would the full committee like to bring it here and review all of them, or do you want to have it scored in some way, or what are your thoughts? Rich?
I think it depends how many we get. I think we should be flexible there. But if it's several, I think having a separate committee do a first pass makes sense. I don't need to be on that committee, but I'll front load, spoiler alert, I'm going to have an opinion. I'm going to look at the applications and weigh in.
Around when are we going to get the RFP? When is it close?
We'll receive responses. The deadline is the 9th, which is the day of our meeting, but it's 2 o'clock. So by that point, I'll be on the phone the week before talking to those that have downloaded to see who's going to respond, and I'll have a pretty good feel of because it's a lot of work. So I'll know, or they'll know a week before. It's not anything they can put together 2 days before the submittal date. So I'll have a good idea.
So our next committee meeting, you can give a report, and then we can make that decision at that point as to how we're going to review them.
Right. I mean, we'd like to hold those interviews shortly after. I mean, I've got here the 17th. That may not. I mean, that's like 8 days later. That may not be feasible. I mean, it takes time for them to prepare. But I'm assuming it's going to be sometime in mid to late July that we would want to have the interviews.
Katie?
Just jumping in, I would suggest we try to set some meeting holds on our calendars for whoever might be on this committee, because summer's always busy, and these interviews will be a substantial part of the decision-making, so it'll be long.
Do you want to do that right now or later?
Let's do that later on. But I would like to get anybody that's interested in being on this review committee, please let Susan and I know. And just send us an email, and then we'll meet and we'll pick 2 people. So
I don't need to be on it, just saying that instead of saying nothing.
okay, thank you. That narrows it down some. Okay. Any more discussion for facilities?
No, that's it.
Any updates from planning and sustainability?
Not beyond the SHPO letter, which I think we covered.
Right. I would like to invite them down. I wonder if they would be willing to come at some point, to come and actually just look at the buildings and get a perspective. Maybe that's at a later date, but it would be nice to communicate with them. And Megan, thank you for communicating with them and keeping that line of communication open.
I will add one thing on this, is that Megan actually was able to reply to the SHPO office after we received the letter, thanking them for the expedited review that they did on our behalf, but also asking if they had any handouts or information that could be shared with the legislators that is easily digestible. You know, what does this mean? So if we hear anything back, of course, we'll share that information.
It'll be interesting, too, if they can provide any examples of a project in this nature that they liked or approved. That'd be interesting to see how, are we unique or not? So. Tim, any other comments? Well, thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.